boop. Boop, 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 boop. Boop, 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 boop. Boop, boop, boop. The important part, Brittany, is that we've come here today for a very special purpose.
Oh, have we?
Yeah.
What purpose is that?
For you to sing Get Low.
To sing Get Low?
Yeah.
The acoustic version?
Yeah.
Yeah. No, okay, it's not Get Low, it's Low. So
Low?
There's Get Low by the Ying Yang Twins, and then there's Low by Flo Rida. So there's a very distinct difference between the two.
I can never get them to go straight in my head.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's hard because they both involve getting low.
So either way, you're getting low no matter what.
Yeah, but one's going from the window to the wall.
But one's fergalicious?
No, that's a different
Definitious?
one. That's a different
That's
one.
a different one?
Yeah.
Oh my goodness.
I don't think she's getting low.
She doesn't get low?
I don't think she's wearing apple bottom jeans or the boots with the fur.
But the whole club was looking at her.
The whole club was looking at her. But she did not hit the flow. Next thing you know.
All right.
She did not get
Listen,
low.
do you want to record that song on the podcast right now?
Yeah, I guess we should record the podcast.
All right.
Yeah.
Back to the podcast. Talking about getting low. We're getting low in the soil, low in the dirt, slurking around in nice boggy areas where there's not a lot of nutrients. And it's very difficult to survive in such areas. But when you have difficulty, it hews the rock to a beautiful, fine shape. One of the most powerful shapes that you can imagine. A circle.
Don't you mean a triangle?
I do not mean a triangle.
Triangle is powerful.
One of the weakest shapes that you can...
One of the weakest shapes? I don't think so. I think one of the weakest shapes is a rhombus.
Oh, that sounds pretty weak. Trapezoids? I wouldn't trust a trapezoid.
Oh,
Not with my life.
with my life. No, absolutely not.
Speaking of shapes, Brittany. So today, we're going to be talking about some shapes of certain plants and tasty, delicious things on the inside as you go and reach for it. Snap!
Yeah. I'm excited because I did not write this outline, so I get to learn something from you this time.
You learn things from me all the time.
Yeah, but not from the podcast. I do all the work.
You do all the work?
Yeah.
I do half of the work.
How?
I do the editing. I set up the hardware.
I also set up the hardware.
Yeah, but, I make the jokes.
Yeah.
All right.
That's fair.
Whatever. Fine. No, it's okay. I clearly see that you don't view me as a valuable team member.
Oh, no, I do.
Of this company.
I do.
No, it's okay.
Of the company.
So,
of our LLC.
yeah, PRT LLC. So, Brittany, we'll talk about the dividends and shares that you've now lost and the stock of this company for questioning.
I don't think so.
My efforts here.
I don't think so.
We're going to talk about carnivorous plants.
All right.
And we're going to get into what makes them special. Why are they different? And why are they so cool, Brittany?
Yeah, why are they cool? Like, why do they do what they do?
Why do they do what they do?
Yeah.
So, typically, carnivorous plants are found in nutrient-poor regions, such as a bog where everything is slothy and you don't have a lot of nutrients inside of it. And once you pull, like phosphorus from the ground, you no longer have that replenishing, right? So in these lands where decomposition is very slow, which is why you never throw a body into a swamp or a bog, because it takes so long to decompose that there's just too much evidence there. Yeah. You need to put it in an exposed place where all of the nutrients can be rapidly degraded and used in other plants and animals.
Okay, so like a rainforest is a better place to dump a body than
Exactly.
a
A
bog.
rainforest is a better place to dump a body than a bog.
Okay, well, I wish I knew that a few years ago.
Well,
it's okay. It's I got away with it. It's fine.
So, what makes these carnivorous plants special, and how can we kind of define them?
Yeah,
is this a rhetorical question where I answer, or are you going to answer this time? Because I can answer, since you don't know.
Yeah,
but
I
I
don't
put
know.
the monitor right in front of your face.
It's still kind of hard to see a little bit. So yeah, you have to answer your own question.
All right, fine.
Yeah.
So, as I said, they adapt typically in poor nutrients, especially in soils that lack nitrogen. And something fascinating about this is that they are actually develop these methods of collecting nutrients via consuming other insects or small mammals if they're tiny enough. This is an example of convergent evolution. So it's not actually a branch of the same species that has had this biodiversity. It's actually different plants around the world have differently come up with the same solution.
Really?
And in this case, eating flesh.
Okay, interesting. So where do you typically find these kinds of plants? Because I can't go outside right now and just like find one and the woods or.
I mean, we found some just a few hours from here.
Yeah, for a few hours from here, but that was in a bog.
Yeah, it wasn't a bog.
Yeah.
Typically, what you'll find is in Southeast Asia, Australia, Southern Africa, Southeast US, all have these different lineages. Mm-hmm. So in these different regions, you'll notice that you have regions of rather warmer climates, wetter, hotter. They're not found widely in all these regions, but within those pockets, you'll find certain areas that allow for them to grow. So, for example, over here in the Southeast US, right? You have bogs and swamps, especially, say, in Florida, where you have all the stagnant water. Those are perfect places for them to grow.
Oh, yeah.
Dolly sods up there in West Virginia.
Yeah.
They have lovely bogs in that area where the water never really leaves, never really goes anywhere. Mm-hmm. It just sits and it's sedentary.
Yes.
Perfect places to grow carnivorous plants because they can outcompete all of these other plants that have not developed some type of mechanism in order to compensate for that nutrition loss. But I say, Brittany, they will very easily be out-defeated in a nutrient-rich soil.
Is that so? Because I did notice that in the bog, the soil there was quite poor, but we did see lots of those little sundews that were growing in the bog, as well as some lichens and other types of small plants. But the soil there was much different than the soil than we saw, for example, in the spruce forests.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Right. So that soil was completely different. And you'll notice that in the bog, there weren't any tall plants, right?
No. It was all spread out and just flat.
Precisely.
Yeah.
And that's not because someone took a massive tree mower and mowed all the trees down. It's because the amount of nutrients there is so insufficient that plants don't have the capabilities of actually growing tall enough. Mm-hmm. So you'll notice that in spruce forest and other types of forest, the plants that are the winners, the A-games, those are the ones that can grow higher than their competitors and get all the sunlight. Right? And so you'll often see that these plants shoot out huge canopies, and anything underneath that canopy will start dying because it can't have enough sunlight to produce all of the nutrients it needs from photosynthesis. Mm-hmm. That is not the case in these areas, right? So that's exactly what would happen to the carnivorous plant inside of the spruce forest that we saw. Right. Just completely die because it couldn't ever reach the heights of the spruce trees.
Well, what if we had a forest of carnivorous plants? Why don't we see forests of these large carnivorous plants instead?
Why don't we see forests? So there's actually no trees that are carnivorous plants. Mm-hmm. Typically because there's better ways. So becoming carnivorous as a plant costs way more nutrients than you ever need to build a nice little firm stem and then grow up and produce some leaves, right? So you have to spend a lot of energy. And we've talked about this before, Brittany, where if you spend a lot of energy inside of one structure of your body or plant, then you don't have time to focus on the rest of it, right?
Right.
If I'm doing nothing but curls in the squat rack, I'm going to get massive biceps, but my legs will be flimsy and weak. Right? Mm-hmm. So that's an example of focusing on one structure exclusively.
Okay.
And in that case, this is often what they'll do is they'll focus on their capturing structures rather than growing nice and tall.
So is the reason for that because they were outcompeted because they were already small plants, and so they developed these structures to help them gather nutrients when they otherwise could not? Right.
So that's one of the hypotheses that some of the scientists studying carnivorous plants have developed is that the mechanism of evolution for these plants is that they were on the liminal space in between that bog area and the trees. And often, in order to compensate for that, there was a structural growth where they were starting to rely on insects around them. One fascinating phylum direction that some of the evolution has seen is actually the use of fecal matter. So these are paracarnivorous plants or pseudocarnivorous plants where they don't quite eat the flesh of another creature, but they will use parts of it. And that gets into where we separate carnivorous plants and paracarnivorous plants.
Interesting. So do we have any examples of carnivorous versus paracarnivorous plants?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of them.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, we're going to get into it.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
Good.
Yeah.
I'm excited. Yes, excellent.
Feels weird not making jokes.
Well, you could still make jokes.
No, it's not the same.
It's not the same?
It's not the same.
No, you have to give information?
Yeah.
Okay.
You're not giving any information this time. It's weird.
Yeah.
It's a weird feeling. I don't like this role reversal.
You don't like the
I
role
like the
reversal?
one-way street.
You
okay?
like the one-way street?
I like the one-way street.
Okay.
It's
yeah.
nice. I just don't like it when you do the things to me that I do to you.
Yeah, you do that a lot.
I really don't appreciate it. I prefer if you stop.
No.
All right. Well, let's see. Would you count if you just stood around and didn't move? Would you count as a carnivorous plant? Because I've often noticed, in order for you to be happy, you often need sunlight, water, attention, and nutrients.
Right. Those are the 4 things I need. So yes, I am a plant. I need at least something to fly into my mouth, so maybe I would count as a carnivorous plant.
So, you need sunlight.
I need sunlight, yes. Sunlight
Okay,
helps.
carnivorous plants need sunlight.
Why do they need sunlight though?
Why do they need sunlight? Because they need the initial energy in order to actually grow their structures, right? So typically what it is they're not producing nutrients because of that nutrient deficient area. So their roots are typically very shallow and thin because there's no nutrients to get inside of that soil anyway. Okay. So there's a difference in between the energy acquirement and the nutrient acquirement, right? So you can eat potatoes every day, all day, right?
Right.
That has carbohydrates. That has what your body needs to burn to make energy, right?
Right.
You'll still die. Right?
Yeah.
So that's because you're lacking the nutrients inside of your body. The nuances that you need in order to develop certain cells and the development of organelles inside of your body. So that's where the insects come into play. So you can still get nutrients from the insects while acquiring energy from sunlight via photosynthesis. So they still have leaves and they still operate like other plants.
I see. So if I am a carnivorous plant just standing there, how would I get these insects to get into my mouth?
There's a lot of ways you can get it.
Oh my, just tell me.
Listen, we're getting to that.
Okay.
Why are you always rushing it? Sometimes in life you need to sit down and just calmly take in the medicinal bubble tea that you were prescribed. Brittany, if I become a doctor, I'm prescribing bubble tea.
You're prescribing bubble
Do
tea.
you know how many times I've had to drink bubble tea in the past 48 hours to heal myself?
You've had to drink bubble tea?
Yeah. Medicinal needs.
Medicinal bubble tea. Okay.
Medicinal bubble tea.
All right.
That's what we're selling at the bake shop that we have.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's true.
Yeah. So.
Yeah. So how would I get insects into my face? Please don't give me a look again.
There's no look. All right. There's several different mechanisms.
Okay.
In order to get things into your face.
Okay.
So one is called the pitfall. Am I just gonna keep telling everything?
No, I mean,
No, it's okay. All right.
Yeah.
No, I'll do all the work. No, you just sit there and look pretty. So Hemophora, which is a type of pitcher plant, which I think people will be relatively familiar with because most people have seen pitcher plants or at least heard about them.
Right.
Right? So they have the sweet, sweet nectar on the inside, and they focus on the surface of their plant in order to acquire those insects. So imagine, right, you have this temple. Let's say, I don't know, it's a dooming temple, so like a temple of doom, right?
Right.
And you have one brave insect that flies around, has this magnificent hat and a whip, and he's constantly going and looking for these temples to acquire sweet, sweet, delicious treasure on the inside, right? So he goes in, he sneaks around, right? Buzz, buzz, zippy, zip, crawls around a little bit, and he smells it. He knows it's close. There's the treasure's just beyond the wall. He can almost touch it. He can feel it. And as it edges closer and closer, it will eventually slip into this pitfall, and then it's too late. It's gone. The insect will never be seen or heard from again. So there's a couple of different mechanisms that they have. So Brittany, are you sticky?
Not currently.
Do you want to be sticky?
It depends with what.
All right. Well, the answer is yes, right? Why? Is because much like insects, they have typically a few different mechanisms in order to attach their surfaces, right? So you'll see flies and everything land on the wall and they don't slip down, right?
Right.
So we'll get into that in another episode that talks about Hemiptera, which are cool insects.
Yes.
Eventually. But without getting into the nuances of those, they'll typically have some type of adhesive mechanism. So what the pitfall plants focus on is actually anti-adhesive properties in order to combat the sticky feet or the hooked feet that these insects will have. Mm-hmm. Can you imagine how to make something that's sticky, not sticky? Or not sticky, sticky?
Not sticky.
How do you get into or out of a sticky situation?
Into or out of a
How do you make a situation sticky enough to capture your prey?
What is going on?
Especially with those shoes.
The shoes?
Don't get me started with the shoes.
Oh my gosh, okay.
So Brittany, how do you make a situation stickier?
How do you make
Or not stickier?
Or not stickier?
Listen, how do you make a sticky situation not sticky?
You won't let me answer the question. Give me a second. Oh my god, I feel so pressured. Anyway, you can release some kind of sticky or non-sticky substance, I'd say.
Okay,
Yeah.
I like
is
that.
Is that right?
I mean, that's normally what I do. Whenever
Yeah.
I get scared and I have a defense mechanism, just
Yeah.
the stickiness that I have and then run away.
Oh, okay. That's weird.
Is it?
Yeah.
Listen, much like the gentle sea pig. Listen, we'll talk about the sea pig later. Okay, so one of the ways that they do it is surface contact, right? So the more contact you have on a surface, the more stickiness or friction you'll have to keep something from moving.
Right.
And this has been seen when you take phone books, right? And you interlay the pages one on one, right? They won't pull apart because of all of that friction. I believe Mythbusters actually did an episode on that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Interesting.
So friction is a very powerful force that when you combine it and acquire all the small little nuances, you can actually keep things from slipping. And typically in, say, technical rescue, you'll create these things called tensionless wraps. So it's where you wrap around and you're actually not putting any weight onto the knots, which is the weakest part of the rope, and you actually have all the friction holding it in. So in this case, what the plants do is actually reduce that surface contact by creating this roughness. So these fine arrays of roughed surfaces allow for when their feet touch the plant, there are a few contact points for it to actually collect. So that sticky or hooked foot won't be able to get a good traction. Okay. Another way that you can do it, right? So let's say that you're climbing around on rocks, and I want to make sure that you slip off of that rock.
Why would you do that?
So I can eat you.
Oh, okay.
Right?
Okay.
Carnivorous plants.
Right.
One thing I could do is, since I saw you put glue on your hands and feet to crawl around, as you do.
Okay.
The plants will actually develop these waxy crystals. As you step on them, the wax will collect onto the insect's feet, right? So now, instead of having that hook or adhesive, you now have waxy substance, which can just slip on the surface.
Okay.
Right? So now you have wax all over your hands, and you have a rough surface, so you can't quite grab it. Okay? Another thing that often these plants will use is directional features. So much like the pitcher plant, right? Sloop. You make a little fun slide for them, just like children. Straight into a van, right? So you build... What? Anyways, so metaphorical children into a metaphorical van. You build a slide so it looks fun. And when they climb to the top and then they see the van on the other side, they're like, oh no, I need to go back. They turn around, but oh no, what happens, right? You have a slope down, and they can't come, and they scratch and scratch and scratch, whoop, slip right down that slide.
Okay. Yeah, so it seems like there's a lot of little parts that come together to make it really, really slippery, and really difficult for insects to escape from the pitcher plant.
Yeah, once they realize this isn't where they want to be, it's too late.
It's too late, yeah.
The plant is waiting. You can feel the rumblings in its stomach start gurgling up.
Okay.
The last aspect that some of these plants will actually use is super hydrophilic surfaces, Brittany.
Okay. What does that mean?
Super hydrophilic, so hydrophilic, water loving, meaning it'll collect water onto the surface. So it's just really good at collecting water. Especially, like I said, they're typically seen in swamps, bogs, and other wetlands. They will collect moisture and typically humidity that's in the air onto the surface. So have you ever driven your car when it's raining or right after it rains and there's like little puddles of water?
Yes.
Okay. And you slam on the brakes and you go skid, 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 skid. Right?
Right.
That's because you start what's called hydroplaning in a car, where there's this thin film of water and it keeps you from actually grabbing the surface of the road. In this case, it's keeping you from grabbing the surface of the plant, so that as they go to run, it's a Scooby-Doo run where they go and then slide down the slide.
Yeah, interesting.
Yeah.
Okay.
So those are pitfall plants. And like I said, one of the examples, Hemaphora, which is a type of pitcher plant, and I think people will be familiar with that. That's one way to do it, right?
Okay.
So Indiana Jones goes into the temple to get the nectar and slips right in, and then they start digesting.
Yeah. I mean, there's many other ones as well. So the one that we saw in Dolly Sods was the sundew. So what kind of mechanism does the sundew use? I know they had the sticky substance on the outside.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. I mean, that's basically what it is.
That's pretty much what it is. Yeah.
So you imagine you have all of your arms out, right? And you have stickiness in your hands. Mm-hmm. And that's what the sundew is. So the moment the insect flies around, it gets caught by the stickiness. Mm-hmm. Now, the stickiness, typically a combination of saccharides and enzymes. So these polymers have this really high elastic modulus, so they can stretch and stretch and stretch, right? And so what it does is as the insect hits it, it starts freaking out. It's like, oh no, something's grabbed me. And it starts struggling. It'll actually move the tentacles back and forth, and another tentacle will touch it. And once it touches it, that super sticky sugar and enzyme substrate will attack the insect, right? And then the insect struggles even harder and harder. And the more it struggles, the more it shakes all of the tentacles. And because they're flimsy little tentacles with massive balls of sugar and enzymes, it attaches them. And slowly, it's pulled in. They're typically killed in a certain manner. It's a very sweet way to murder them before the digestion process.
Oh, really?
Can you imagine what it is?
Crushing them?
Some of them crush them, but
Yeah.
that's actually going to be closer to the snap mechanisms, which is next.
Oh, okay.
What these guys do is that super sticky substance. As it starts attaching, it starts spreading, just like water on a table spreads over their body. And eventually what it does is it covers the trachea of the insects, and then they start breathing in sugar.
Oh.
And no more breath.
Oh.
After that,
Interesting.
sticky lungs.
Oh, that sounds awful. That sounds like a really bad way to go.
Yep, and then the insect
Yeah.
and then gets dissolved
I
from
think-
all the enzymes.
I think I would rather be crushed from a snap mechanism than breathing in sugar and dying from sugar in my lungs. But that's just me.
Cacao.
Yeah.
So we have pitfalls. You know what else is great
What?
to grow?
What?
Insects into snapping plants. No. That was a bad pivot.
Yeah, that was not a great point. You know what though? It's fine. We could say, the insect was thrown into the snap mechanism of
Thrust
like,
into the arms of glorious fate.
Yeah, like the Venus flytrap.
Like the Venus flytrap.
Yeah.
Much like the siren's call. The insects will typically be attracted to these plants by particular attractants, whether it's visual or olfactory. Either way, they start flying to these, right? And you go buzz, 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 snap. So that's the one that we're talking about now, Brittany, is the snippy snaps, the snapdragons, which are the most powerful of dragons because they will snap clothes. Ripped off fingers, okay?
I'm pretty sure snapdragons are just harmless flowers and not carnivorous plants.
Oh, right.
Yeah.
Well,
But Venus flytraps, however.
Yes. So I imagine that most people have seen a Venus flytrap, but basically it's like this taco-looking thing, right? And it's wide open, and it has these beautiful little hairs on it. So what these hairs are mechanosensory zones. So these triggers, which once you press them, they create a biomechanical reaction that tells the plant, okay, it's time to close. So what it'll do is contract all of the cells that it's developed and go schnick. I think that one's pretty understandable,
Pretty straightforward,
right? You
yeah.
touch it, and if you've ever seen like the touch-me-nots, those are really cool plants. As soon as you tickle them, they go close up.
Yeah.
Same thing with the Venus flytrap, just
Okay.
with more digestive enzymes.
Okay, so the touch me not is just like, hey, get away from me, touch me not. But the Venus flytrap is actually using that mechanism to gather nutrients instead.
Exactly. And then it'll sit there with the insect struggling until it's just crushed to death. And then it'll be consumed.
Interesting. You know what all this talk of insects being digested makes me want?
Food?
Some bubble tea.
Bubble tea?
And you know how I want that bubble tea? I want to slurp it up with one of those big old straws.
Yeah, why don't we get one of those?
Yeah, what I keep asking where's the straw that you're gonna order, the
I'll-
big
I'll-
metal straw.
I'll order the
Yeah,
straws. We can get it.
Because it's not the same like eating the bubbles out with a spoon. You want that suction. hey, can I do that with as my, hypothetical carnivorous plant that I am? Is there anything that I can do that, is a similar mechanism?
Of sucking?
Yeah.
Bubbles?
Yeah.
All right. So I'm glad you bring this up, Brittany. It's real great, right? So if you want your medicinal bubble tea,
Yes.
Prescribed to you by a doctor, which I will prescribe it to you when I'm a doctor.
When you're a doctor,
Yeah.
you're not going to be that kind of doctor. Neither am I.
When I become a PhD doctor, right? It's the same thing.
Yeah.
I'm not really.
Yeah, they give you a prescription pad at the
Yeah,
end of your
prescription
PhD.
pad, and you're like ready.
Yeah.
I mean, you know all the things in your field. That's
Yeah.
good enough.
Yeah.
So suction, Brittany, since you love suction so much, right? Much like the powerful vacuum cleaner. There's ways that carnivorous plants utilize these features in order to acquire insects and nutrients. So Utricularia is a type of plant that has often been studied for these suction mechanisms. So what it is they have bladders, and they're dimorphic, and they will change morphology depending on the region that they're in. So they'll capture big insects, small insects, medium insects. That all depends on what's around, and the plant will actually change the bladder size that it needs, which I wish you could do for long
great.
trips.
Yeah. So I don't have to pee once every hour.
And that will allow to collect insects. Typically what that is it's a bladder, right? And it contains an aqueous substance, water, as well as enzymes and proteases and things of that nature, right? And it remains closed so that it can keep all of the water on the inside. So it's like this little sack, this flat little sack, right? So these plants typically emit some type of olfactory, sweet, delicious smelling substance so that insects will become attracted and come closer. But it doesn't want to open up that bladder because all of the contents will spill out. And it will become desiccated or dry.
Yes.
So what it does is it waits, closed together, and as soon as one of the insects steps on one of these trap doors, right? So again, very similar to the mechanosensory hair triggering, is it will open up the bladder, right? And as it opens up the bladder, have you ever seen water in a glass or anything like that? You see the capillary action where it's actually clinging to the side, right? So that's the same thing here, is that this aqueous solution will capture the insects that are stepping on it, and it will, as it opens up, it creates this vacuum, so to speak, of both capillary action and movement where the insect falls in, and then the bladder closes back up. So it sucks the insect in. And so as the insect is struggling, the capillary action is keeping the insect collected to it. Often, like you'll see if you're in a pool, an insect gets stuck on the surface, right? So that surface tension is actually holding on to the insect's legs, not letting it go. So it slowly sucks it in and drowns it, pulling it down like a kraken pulls a ship to the bottom of the ocean.
Interesting. Or like a straw can pull up a tapioca bubble in bubble tea.
Yes.
Well, okay, that's a few different mechanisms that we've talked about, but why do we need to specialize? I mean, what if I really, really wanted to get as many different insects into my face as possible? Can I just evolve to the point where I have a bunch of different mechanisms?
So you can, but as we said before, anytime you evolve a certain body part or structure, it takes a lot of energy. Especially if you build some biosensors inside of the plant that can actually move, right? So any type of kinetic movement takes a lot of energy. So if we're sitting still and we're not moving, we're not consuming much energy. But once we go running, lifting weights, then we have to eat more, right? That hunger sets in. It's the same thing here, is that in order to move, you're consuming energy. So you have to make sure it's worthwhile. And what some of these plants will do is they will combine some of the functions that we have previously discussed. One such combination of plants will be called modal glue tentacles, right? That's what they use. Is you have these tentacles much like the sundew, but instead what it does is as soon as it feels something touch it, it'll move another tentacle to touch the insect as well. As soon as it starts using multiple tentacles to touch the insect, it'll be like, oh, okay, I have something now. And it'll close in, like jaws wrapping around it, and pull it in, and then consume it.
Interesting. Okay, so it chooses to specialize in a few different ways, but it sounds like it's a very energy efficient way to specialize.
Exactly. You must make it energy efficient, because like I said, you're in nutrient poor soils. So this is the best way that you have found in order to get nutrients inside of this. So anytime you put any of your energy, has to be worthwhile.
Okay.
And typically it's either in structures or reproduction.
Well, it sounds like being a carnivorous plant requires a lot of energy because you have to bring these insects in, kind of attract them some way, and then you have to trap them. Can I just be a lazy plant and have, maybe a symbiotic relationship, have something just drop nutrients into my face instead?
Yeah, there's ways to do that. And in one way, you have these borderline carnivorous plants, such as the toilet pitchers.
The toilet pitchers.
Or the Inloi. So it actually holds nectar that attracts animals and insects. Specifically, bats will typically come to these plants either for the nectar or to eat the insects, depending on the species and location of these plants. But what it does is, as the bats come in, they will roost there, they will eat the insects, and they're like, oh man, this plant's great. And what does it do? It poops inside of it, right? You're there and you're eating a meal. It's just like going to a buffet, like a good old American buffet. You go there, you better have a toilet ready and waiting. Better be extra wide. Talking wide, trailer wide. Like you got to be backing up. They actually will put lights on, right? So you can actually order the lights, especially like, I don't know. Some corral, we'll just say silver corral.
Silver corral? Okay.
Yeah. They'll attach little backup lights for you in the back of your little pants.
Okay.
If you need them.
Okay.
Right? Beep, beep,
Wow,
beep,
what a great country.
What a great country.
Yeah.
Yay, obesity. Anyways, so you have these bats coming in, and as they're eating all the insects, they're like, wow, look at this conveniently placed toilet, and just a little bit of guano. Guano is a powerful substance. It's been used in many alchemical reactions.
Yeah, it is a very important thing for alchemical reactions. So these bats are literally shitting where they eat, though.
Right. Yeah. I mean, sometimes animals do that, right?
Yeah. I mean, I thought that was the saying, you don't shit where you eat.
Yeah, but animals don't know that.
Animals haven't heard the saying.
Another pitcher plant, Brittany. The Nemethesis himlasiana, right? I probably butchered that name.
Yeah,
but
never heard of it.
Anyways, it also allows bats to roost nearby, and it will collect the feces off these bats. But this particular plant is really cool in that we talked about how carnivorous plants will have cues, right? So it might be olfactory cues, it might be visual cues to attract the insects. But Schooner in 2015 demonstrated that these plants actually have a structure in the back of the pitcher that allows for echolocation, so this reflector of noise. So as bats start using echolocation, they can actually hear the reverberation from their sounds from this pitcher plant. So this pitcher plant has developed the back of its mouth, so to speak, or the pitcher, to actually reflect the particular frequency that bats emit. And so these bats can actually locate these plants specifically in an entire forest based on that echolocation, because the plant sends back that signal. So that's like food, and then the plant goes food.
Yeah. Okay.
And
so
then
it's actually calling out to the bat itself. Interesting.
So that's an example of an acoustic attractant, which you don't typically find in plants, right? You don't think of plants making noise or using noise in order to get food, but bam.
Yeah, absolutely not. I don't think I've ever heard of a plant that's like, Brittany, eat me.
Oh, I've had plants tell me that, especially at that concert. So yeah, I think that's really fascinating when you can actually see all these plants and how they develop these very unique niches, which is why carnivorous plants are so cool. So they develop these unique niches and roles.
Right. Well, it's interesting too that when you think of a carnivorous plant, they're so much more different than plants that you would typically see, especially the way that they've evolved ecologically. Why are they so different?
Oh, we've been talking about why they're so different. What kind of question is that? All right, from now on, I'm doing the pivots.
Okay.
Or you can try the pivots. This is like navigation all over again.
Yeah, I am not the navigator.
So, Brittany, I'm glad you asked again why they're so specially different.
Yeah.
So great. Let me keep explaining.
Okay. Please do. I haven't read this outline, so.
So, like I said, carnivorous plants are almost never found as trees. Some have argued that certain species can be considered dwarf trees, but typically they're herb-style plants without any bark. And the reason for this is in order to create that killer piece, right? In order to create your own knife, your own trap, your own sticky glue to slaver someone with and pull them in close and suck on their face until you collect all of their energy. It takes a lot in order to do that.
Yeah.
So they typically focus on their functionality and morphology growth of their killer pieces rather than leaf mass. So leaf mass takes up a lot of energy in order to grow big and fat, right?
Right. So trees. That's why they are so large, because they're focusing on growing as many leaves as possible for photosynthesis, whereas these don't really focus on the photosynthesis, so they don't need to be large and barky to support all that leaf mass.
Exactly. Yeah. So you have to make a little choice, right? Do you want to kill or do you want to photosynthesize?
Always choose to kill.
And so when we saw those sundews, you noticed they only had very tiny leaves.
Right.
Right? And that's just collecting enough energy so that they can build these big old traps.
Okay.
Yeah. And the other thing about using the traps, because it takes a long time to digest these things, it's like meal prepping, right? You make a big fat piece of meal or a large insect sitting on your enzymes, and it will corrode that over time.
Okay.
The reason why that's advantageous is, as I said before, their roots are typically shallow because there's not enough nutrients in the soil. So you have these insects sitting on these plants as it dissolves it over time. So it can continually eat even if the sunlight isn't good or they don't have the capabilities of storing a lot of energy in their roots because they're small roots.
Okay. So it's almost like it's breaking it up into tiny little Tupperwares throughout the week, and just like, okay, here's some lunch for today, here's some lunch for tomorrow, here's some lunch for Thursday.
Exactly.
So, yeah.
That's exactly what it is.
Yeah.
So typically what we'll see inside of these plants is these hydrolyzing enzymes, so breaking down of the insects, right? But there's some really cool plants that we're about to talk about that are a little bit distinct from that, and they're trap mutualisms. Typically, these can be broken into two branches of carnivorous plants. So these parasitic ones or microparasitic ones, either they produce their own enzymes or they don't. And that's typically how we'll look at them. Whether they require another insect, animal, or some type of other organism to break down its food for it. For example, like a mama bird chewing something up and spitting it in their mouth, right? They'll go get the worm, but they need someone to chew the worm for them.
Okay.
Some of them, as we talked about, don't actually produce these enzymes, right? So they're more of a paracarnivorous plant. And one such species is going to be the Rudulii, which is the hemicarnivorous, or not fully carnivorous, in which they actually attract their prey, but they don't eat them. Instead, the hemipteran bug, Parodea, will actually eat all of the prey, and then the leftover bits of the prey, after getting chewed up, will be absorbed, as well as the poop. So in this case, it's consuming the poop of the hemipteran bug that'll eat it, as well as the leftover prey species, right? So the hemipteran bug, much like many other insects, actually has lysozymes inside of its saliva, right? That'll start breaking down the creature. And so as it chomps down, little bits of the flesh will drip onto the plant's leaf or tongue, and it'll absorb all of that, as well as the feces. So.
Oh, interesting. So it has a very very select palette of shit and leftovers.
Exactly. One other cool one that I will point out that's slightly different is going to be the pelotum, which are carnivorous only during a part of its life, and it's a climber. So, unlike other plants, such as the sundew that we've talked about, or the Venus flytrap, or the dwarf carnivorous plant, they typically stay in one particular area and they don't move around a lot, right?
Right.
This one will actually create runners or clumps, right? And vine its way through so that it can wiggle-waggle throughout the forest and the bog and collect insects that way. And the other thing that it does is it will only eat when it needs to eat. So instead of spending a lot of time developing these consuming, functional, morphological traps, it will actually wait until it's like, oh man, the soil's weak here. I'm not getting enough nutrients. There's only one way around this. Much like the Donner Party.
Really interesting.
You turn to eating.
Yeah, when you have to.
When you have to.
When it's all hope is lost.
When all hope is lost. That's what it does.
Okay.
So I think that's really cool. Is it's only carnivorous if it needs to be. It wants to live a simple life.
Yeah.
With simple leaves.
Yeah.
And run around on all of its stolen, which are the runners. Okay. Until, has no choice.
Yeah.
It was backed into a corner. It was self-defense.
Had to be done.
Yeah, I thought so. So, Brittany, those are some of the cool insects that have been consumed by the even cooler carnivorous plants.
Yeah, very interesting. There's a lot of different mechanisms, it seems like, for carnivorous plants that I actually was not aware of until very recently. Yeah.
You want to learn one more thing about carnivorous plants?
I would love to learn one more thing about carnivorous plants.
I bet you would.
Yes, I love learning about carnivorous plants.
So,
and many other things.
One thing that people don't think about when they think of carnivorous plants is actually the biotechnology that is typically used with it. So, several different species have been looked at for particular extracts so that you can actually use them for medicinal purposes. These will range from antibacterial to anti-cancer, antioxidants. So they've been ground up and looked at particular extracts that you can have. Interestingly enough, there are certain native tribes that have used carnivorous plants to grind it up into aphrodisiacs, right? So I thought that was really cool.
Aphrodisiacs, you say? Interesting.
Yeah. Tincture is the extraction that they call it. And typically that's from freshly pressed leaves from this plant. And they'll use it, right? So the lore was you have to go consume things, right? And going out there and consuming things like this plant require a lot of passion and energy and requirement, right?
Right.
So you would feed this to your partner so that they needed to consume the love and passion that you had.
Oh, okay. That's kind of a roundabout way to go about it, but okay.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So
I thought it was cool.
Yeah,
so
that is cool.
There's different biotechnologies that are involved with carnivorous plants, which I didn't even think of until I started researching this particular topic.
Yeah, I'd never thought of looking at a carnivorous plant as something medicinal or as an aphrodisiac or anything like that. But interesting.
Yep. They've also cured spasms in guinea pigs using some extracts from carnivorous plants.
Oh, thank God, because my guinea pigs will not stop spasming.
I mean, I think the point was to use it on humans, but they never got to that part.
They just got too busy with all the guinea pigs spasming. So.
They had a real epidemic, okay? You can't just have spasming guinea pigs everywhere.
Yeah, it's a real problem.
That's what I had. There's a lot of other biotechnologies that we won't get into about the plants, but just so that you and the listeners are aware, there are some really cool extract processes for carnivorous plants because they create such unique enzymes, right? So there's typically only about 800 species that we've identified, and as I said, it's convergent evolution, so it's a whole bunch of different lineages, and because of these different lineages, they actually have completely different enzymes and molecules inside of their system. So the extraction process and collecting it has really produced some fascinating results as to what we can get, which are completely different than the other types of plants that we've used for medicinal purposes.
That is true. That's very interesting. So I saw that you had that paper, and I'm sure that we will be able to provide that paper for our listeners so they can look into all these different medicinal purposes for these plants.
Of course.
Yeah.
As always, we'll put up the references so you guys can go learn more about these plants, right?
Right. I will go learn more about these plants. So it wouldn't be frowned upon if I just went to a greenhouse and bought one of these carnivorous plants and then just started eating it.
Eating the carnivorous plant?
Yeah. I mean, how...
Eating the eater?
Yeah. Okay, listen, I'm an alpha predator, okay? Humans are on top, and I'm going to eat the other carnivores.
All right.
Including carnivorous plants.
Until they outcompete us.
And then we... Yeah. I mean, if they weren't endangered, I would eat a tiger.
You'd eat a tiger?
Yeah.
All right, Brittany.
Yeah. If they weren't endangered.
Only if you fight it with your bare hands.
Yeah. I'll eat a bear too. Kill it with my bare hands.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
All
and
right,
then I'll take its hands, and then I'll have multiple sets of bare hands.
Multiple sets of bare hands. Bare hands for every situation.
Yeah.
Nothing beats the frying pan, Brittany. The most powerful of weapons.
Is it?
No, it's not. It's really not.
Yeah.
That's carnivorous plants.
That's carnivorous plants. Thank you. That was very interesting. I'm glad you talked at me this time because I like learning things as well.
I'm glad that you tried to make pivots for our
I
conversation.
am not good at pivots. You know what? This is the first time I've had to make pivots, and it was difficult, but the role reversal here. It takes a little bit of getting used to.
It takes some getting used to. Yeah.
All right. Well, we will put up the references, and people can go learn more about carnivorous plants, and you can also find us on our social media on PRTcast, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, Patreon. Please donate. Nobody's donated.
I like how you mentioned that nobody's donated.
Every single time.
And that way that they're like, oh, no one's donating. I guess I won't donate either.
Oh, wait. There was, that one person that donated.
The one person, the one time?
Yeah.
Yourself? Yeah.
No. It was that one person, my really, really rich, distant relative that gave us money. Yeah, that person.
That one. I'm really glad. We're doing great.
Yeah, we're doing so great.
I mean, I think we're doing great.
We are doing great.
Only because of our wonderful fans.
Yes, exactly. We do have some really great fans that stick with us every single week. So
I agree. And pretty soon there'll be merch for them as well.
Oh yeah, you're supposed to be
That'll
3D
be on the website.
3D printing some stuff.
I've looked into it. We have merch on the ready. I also have looked into the business cards for when we travel for the podcast to Southeast Asia.
Right.
So that we can hand those out while we're there.
We're going to hand out business cards in Southeast Asia in non-English speaking territory.
Correct. There you go.
And they'll be like, yeah, I know what a podcast is. Yeah.
That's exactly what will happen.
Oh, okay. Yeah,
Yep.
I'm sure.
Yep.
I'm sure they will care very much.
We'll just put them all on a plane, like just airdrop them. All over.
Yeah, you think so?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That'd be great.
You think people like living in rural Laos will...
Oh, yeah. Laos, that will be our biggest fan base.
Laos? Okay.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, yes. Well, when we go to Laos, we'll see how well it goes there.
And if you guys want to learn more about some of the places that we will travel to for you,
yes,
there is no length we're not willing to go to for our listeners.
Yeah, it's 100% for our listeners and not just for our
So if you would like
pleasure.
to learn more about that, you can always visit the travel blog as well.
Yeah, there's the travel blog. So I put up a link on our social media. You can also email us if you are interested any further in learning about our travels. But the travel blog is on WordPress. It's under Wonders of Anarchy.
Perfect.
Yeah.
So I think that's been a great week. Yeah.
Has it been a great week?
It's been busy.
You say that every single week.
Every week is busy.
Every week is busy.
All right. Anyways, Brittany. We're done.
We're done with this episode.
And
Excellent.
then we'll be back next week.
Yeah, we'll be back next week talking about other things. We're recording so many different episodes right now. I don't even know what we're doing next week. So
They will find out.
Yeah, they'll find out. I mean, we'll find out too, like a few days before the episode's even released. So
that's how I prefer it to be.
The semester has started. It's not as smooth and planned out as it was over the summer. So over the summer, it was just like, oh yeah, we have all this stuff planned out. It's really nice and smooth and everything. And now that the semester has started and we're a lot busier, it's just like
we really scrambling it
together. Oh yeah. We're doing our best. We're grad students. Give us a break.
Give us a break.
Yeah.
Wonderful. Well, we'll see you next week.
See you next week.